and then you can start whenever you want.
Oh, well, so I know that we're both really good social media savvy people.
Absolutely,
we both
yes.
spend all hours of the day on social media.
Yes.
So with that in mind, have you heard of the most recent social media or medias? I don't know what the verbiage is, that came out a couple days ago as of recording.
So what is a social media again?
It's I used to, the millennial in me almost came out and I said it's a website. It's an app.
Well, it depends. Some are still a website, and some, they're multi-tiered, and then others are, because I don't know that MySpace has an app, but who knows?
No, that's a good point.
I've never tried.
Yeah, I wonder. It should be an app. I feel like right now is the perfect time for a revitalization.
I think, we're missing out on the David Fincher installment of the MySpace movie, where we can hear why Tom was everybody's friend and see what happened there. Because I'm sure if it was as scintillating as Facebook's, how should we say, conception and initial initiation, then yeah, I'm sure MySpace has got to be just fraught with peril.
I would definitely watch that documentary, what you call it.
Back to your air quotes, yes.
Yes.
A docudrama, if you will.
But I think I know the best way for MySpace to jump right in, straight into being relevant again. They can develop a text-based social media app, and maybe talk about where you leave kind of posts, or I guess like tweets or something like that. Maybe make their own.
You can't say tweets. That's proprietary to a devil. So we can't use that anymore.
That's fair. I mean, just because the Twitter implosion or the Twitter clone implosion has occurred. Have you heard of Meta? Because I have to call them Meta because that's their company name. Meta's new app called Threads.
No, I have not heard of Meta Threads before, but it sounds like a monthly subscription box where you can gussy yourself up in new and exciting ways.
I wish it was that exciting. No.
Oh, okay.
So, allegedly, and this is because there is apparently a lawsuit being threatened
by Stitch Fix, I think.
Yes. That Meta took all the people that were fired on Twitter from Twitter and made their own Twitter clone. So,
hey, yeah. I mean, Facebook itself is a clone of a couple other things, if stories are to be believed. So why not just keep perpetuating it?
Oh, yeah. You can sign in. Technically, it's through Instagram and not Facebook, but it's the same company. But
here's the problem. How alt-right can we get over the course of this? Because, I mean, we already have Truth Social, which is kind of like it fosters all of the glorious Q initiates. And then Twitter is now becoming the new right-wing media because they're trying to bring everybody back to it. So now is this the attempt to cultivate? Because, I mean, Facebook is also notorious for this is where your uncle gets his news feed and previously posted about guns and his love of his country.
I think based off of what I understand, because I'm not on Threads, I'm not that cool, is that they took all the social media influencers from Instagram and pretty much told them that instead of, like filming themselves and taking pictures and stuff like that, they had to write stuff. So a lot of them, like, they got these big names to pretty much say, like, I'm hungry. What's your favorite fast food joint? Or I'm going to Arby's. What kind of fries do you like? And that is kind of the main gist of Threads. It's what if Instagram, influencers had to write paragraphs.
So what if those annoying text threads that your friends used to include you in on, like, hey, this is really cool post that I found over here on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of your favorite posted forum that you use in every episode, and that 4chan.
Oh, yes,
so,
yes.
Is all of this. Here's this cool 4chan thread that I found about the different Mountain Dew flavors, and one of them's called "Hitler didn't do anything wrong." And
Good
then
reference.
you keep getting dinged 18 times by everybody responding to said text when you just want people to shut up and leave you alone because you like to forget that humanity exists once you get home.
I do have to say, I know this is a bit and all, but kudos to that callback because that actually occurred, right?
Yes, I do. I do. I'd say I had frequent conversations. That's where gushing grannies came from.
Oh, yes, you're right. See, that's where I was in the dark in that case.
I mean, it's probably better to be in the dark on gushing grannies. You know, feel, not see.
Mm-hmm. Just close your eyes and dive in. Hope for the best. Come up for air.
Yes. Like hurling a hot dog down a hallway. But okay. I think I need to found the official antisocial network where, you know, you just have a site that has none of your relevant information posted and you don't interact with anybody. You have no friends. And if you can get to negative friends by here's how many people that you've blocked, if that is actually included in the course of your social network, as Shane has blocked 872,000 people.
I like that. Instead of how many people you're following, you actually automatically start by following everyone, and then it's a record of how many people you block.
I think it's just knowing that anybody who signs up, you have to be the intrepid soul who's like, I'm going to go so far out of my way to ensure I never talk to you.
I like that. That is how we turn this new Twitterverse on its head, is that we go with from that angle.
Indeed. So coming next month, the Antisocial Network, as brought to you by the Disinformed podcast, and our initial, what should we say? We can't use thread, we can't use tweet. It's verbal diarrhea. So our first explosion will be by the eternal. Behold. It is the Disinformed podcast. I am Shane,
and I'm Michael.
And we are back to a duo. It's a duet. We're the Hall & Oates of this podcast, with occasional guest vocalist Dolly Parton. It's always a delightful time getting to just reconvene and let the two of us just go completely to jelly in our mental spaces together.
Oh yes, it's fun. I don't think they're ready for this jelly. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That's where my mind space is at right now. Like I could.
Bootylicious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I could.
That's Bootylicious Michael Clark. I think that was your high school nickname, as I recall, in Peoria.
Most likely to be Bootylicious. That was my graduation yearbook thing. Title.
I think I misspoke. I'm sorry. I misread it from my notes here. It was actually Booty Juice. Booty Juice Michael Clark was your official nickname. All of that sweat.
I was gonna say I do have a lot of swamp ass, so it's and it's not like it changed once I got to college. Like I was like this as a kid, so.
I think, Booty Juice, it was the derivative after Niagara ass didn't stick. So we had to just change it up slightly.
Yeah, that didn't roll off the tongue as well. Like, and I mean.
It rolls off the cheeks, though.
It definitely does. But, like, after someone tried to write a barrel down it, and it was a mess. Like, the cleanup crews.
I thought we were talking about butt plugs. We'd mentioned off air that was.
Well, I mean, I said that they're not experimental anymore, which I would kind of argue that that I feel like butt plugs have entered the mainstream.
Orifices.
Yes, yeah, mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
To go with the Niagara. But yeah, no, I'm not going to argue for that that conversation though. I don't want to go that far into butt plugs because even though they might be mainstream in my opinion, I also don't know anything about them. So,
well, they don't work well with hemorrhoids. I'm just gonna, as a public service announcement, be careful, kids.
I mean, if it already hurts, I can't imagine doing work on it.
Well, here's the thing. The insertion is not going to be as much of the problem with the hemorrhoids. It's the extraction that's the issue.
Oh,
yeah. You don't want things getting tangled around there. So have you ever tried to pull the lights off your Christmas tree while it's still plugged in? That's basically extracting a butt plug with hemorrhoids.
Oh, God.
You're going to get shocked with something and it's not going to be pretty. And then your family will stop talking to you because you did it in front of everybody.
Man, Christmas will never be the same again. But when
ho, ho, ho.
But when you say that, it reminds me of this meme that I saw in the ethers of the internet about the idea that if you were to try and suck on a light bulb, you actually cannot remove it from your mouth afterwards, without cracking it. I was
like, which end are we talking about here? Because Uncle Fester has been sucking on those for years.
No, the big end. The end that obviously does not look... The glass end. The end that's like...
The bell end.
Do not put in your mouth.
Well, I get okay. So we're back to glass ass here, where people are screwing mason jars into their keisters. Why would one ever feel compelled to put a light bulb into your mouth?
I think it's just because the act of someone saying don't do this, just like don't put foil into a microwave, like that. Like someone's like, you know what? I bet I can fit my a light bulb in my mouth. And then usually the response after that, after a couple minutes, is, hey, how do I remove this?
Yeah, don't extract things from your toaster with a fork.
Yeah, that's a good one. Mm-hmm.
Don't run around with a giant metal pole while lightning is striking around you. These sorts of general wisdom.
Yeah, where it's like, you shouldn't do this, but because someone said not to, you feel compelled to at least try. Like, I could do this. I could get away. It reminds.
See, I function more on the end of like going to the alternative of just I take a bunch of sharpened knives. I take a bunch of sharpened scissors into schools, and I'm just like, here, run around with this for a minute, see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. You are the person that will go into a group and says, hey, don't put a light bulb in your mouth, and someone's like, I can do that.
I'm more like, caution to the wind. I was like, that the signs around the pool that say don't run, that's just a plain falsehood.
Oh, you're not even with the challenge. You're like, that's a lie. You could do it. Just go. Yeah. Just go for it.
It's a slip and slide.
Yeah.
You just don't have to pay the extra money. You do, however, have to worry about how the skin is going to regrow on your thighs.
I mean, yeah. Especially if the pool deck is a little bit dry, but what's the fun in having it like soaking wet? Like, it's a slip and slide. Doesn't necessarily mean it needs water, right?
Yeah, and you're going to have plenty of time to regrow the skin as you're in concussion protocols.
Yeah. I did want to, what was it? For some reason, talking about things that people think that they can get away with reminds me of right after the submarine, the Titanic sub. Where,
I was like, the 2020 election?
No, oh God, no.
We're back on this?
No,
okay.
No. That's next week. But so there was talk on Twitter about like, well, it was an immediate implosion. No one could have survived. And then there were some people like joking around like, well, you could have no-clipped out of you jump at the right moment. Like people on a falling elevator, you jump at the right moment, you won't die. Someone was like, well, you could just jump and ride the air bubble to the surface. And someone was like, I don't think that they were like completely coherent, but I think that they were serious. They said pretty much, most people think that they would die in this sort of situation, but I feel like, I don't know how, but I would make it. I would survive this submarine implosion.
Okay. So they're Aquaman.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in the immortal words of our favorite baseball player, who I never remember his name, I think it's Quentin Gamble or something like this. People like to think it don't be like it is, but it do.
It definitely do be like that. Mm-hmm.
It do be like that. I really had not heard much of anything about the whole Titanic submarine thing. This is how far removed from just general sociability I am, not even social networks. But what I will say is that I feel like it might have a lot in common with something I'm watching currently and our prior episodes. So there is a weird convergence in the force in that Melissa and I have started rewatching The X-Files because she has never finished it. And this is something that I've appreciated and in a former relationship watched the entirety of all of the seasons. So in going back, several weeks ago, there was an episode which revolved around the Satanic Panic.
Oh.
That was, of course, occurring in the mid-90s at the height of all of this glorious nonsense. And it revolved around a sort of a coven of individuals who were all Satan worshippers who ran a school. And there was some ritual abuse syndrome because there was a child who claimed that she had repressed memories, and they claimed that they had brought this on by giving the child drugs after the things. And it had the full plethora, the whole gambit of like forced to have abortions, forced to have children and sacrifice them. And the girl was claiming she was having kids since she was like 8. And you're like, okay, so physiologically, this is just not possible. But the kicker of the whole episode is that there was, in point of fact, someone who was in league with dark forces who was actually doing ritual magic and killing people with it.
Oh,
and that person escapes by the end of the episode. No one ever figures out that is the person. They're able to pin all of their crimes on this sect of hapless Satanists. So that was fun enough. I'm like, the X-Files is basically the Disinformed podcast as brought to you by the X-Files because of all of the material that churns in. And I said that, and the episode we watched last night revolved around a ship that was trapped up in the Atlantic that was essentially supposed to have gone to the same space as the ship involved in the Philadelphia experiment.
Okay.
And so this is where I bring myself around to the whole Titanic situation, is I'm like, maybe they just hit the pocket vortex and they just lapsed into another dimension, and then they came back. So it's possible they did survive somewhere in an event horizon like future.
Okay.
They may have made it out.
Okay.
They just fused with the hull.
I see. That kind of lends credence, whatever. I always hate whatever.
Don't you say credence. Don't do it.
It lends authenticity.
Ooh, well done.
Yeah, to this conspiracy theory of surrounding the submarine, in that it was destroyed because Stockton Rush, I think it was, the owner of the company, the person who built the submarine, he had dirt on the Clintons. And so he was taken out before he could reveal his secrets.
Stockton Rush,
yes.
You say?
Yes.
That sounds like a villain on Justified, for God's sakes.
It's because he is named after two of his ancestors who both signed the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, I was about to say John Stockton.
Yeah, I think it was Jonathan Stockton or Richard Stockton and Benjamin Rush, who were both...
The fact that you know this is impressive.
Honestly, the reason why I know this is because I'm actually listening to a podcast about him.
We're back on Behind the Bastards again.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
only real listening.
Mm-hmm. But the conspiracy theory has nothing to do with that episode, with those episodes.
Okay.
But that's something I found on my trawling is actually a good word for this, but trawling through Twitter. Because that's the only way I get any sort of information. I usually just don't really assume that it's true, but it's always fun to see other people making fun of conspiracy theorists, because before they even found any sort of rubble, people were saying that either it was a hit job to, because he had dirt on the Clintons, or my favorite, because it sank because it went woke.
So it wasn't because it was attacked by the Grimace.
No, though that one
with the rubble.
I think that is my headcanon, or not headcanon. That's reality for me. They knew the secret ingredient to the Grimace milkshake, and Grimace had to silence him.
I'm like, I think the Hamburglar said rubble.
Yes.
Maybe I've missed the... Okay,
you're right.
Yes,
yeah, you're right. But
confusing my 90s McDonald's tropes here.
Yeah.
Since we're a decent chunk into the show here, what I will say is welcome to all of you lovely listeners out there. Happy to have you as always. What we typically do on the show is we like to delve into random esoterica like McDonald's characters from the 90s commercials. And we lie about them, but that's not happening this week. And we are down the individual who was supposed to be presenting, and we had to kind of adjust our recording schedule a little bit and massage it, if you will. Just around personal circumstances, which has not happened very often.
Surprisingly so.
Over the course of over 200 episodes now. We very rarely have hiccups like this. But we have survived thus far, so we're going to have a little fun, a little free form. Just our standard operating, ribbled nonsense that just trickles out of our brains. And based on that... you were saying?
Oh, I was going to say I was quite impressed at the places that we went in the last 20 some odd minutes.
Are you always surprised with the places we wind up going just based on silly, awkward questions?
You know what? No, you're right. I shouldn't be surprised. This sounds like quite par for the course. Like, honestly, I thought you were going to introduce an episode right then and there. And I would have been like, okay, we were a little bit long in the intro, but not terrible. This is like normal. So
yeah, we are kind of the Stray Thoughts podcast. And given that we have got some ADHD being injected in a constant, we are kind of neuro. So one of my colleagues has a neurodivergent child, and she was mentioning that rather than saying that, they are to refer to their child as neurospicy.
I like that. I'm going to start.
I figured you might want to adopt that.
I'm neurospicy.
Yes.
Don't take a bite of my brain or else it'll burn.
Which makes me want to describe myself as neuro non-spicy, and I think that's also appropriate.
Neuro bland.
No, neuro non-spicy. This is how I order my Thai food, so it's how it's going to be applicable. So I'm too goddamn old to have anything. I just can't fathom why people want to eat that much spice. I don't. Why you want to burn your own and your? I get it, but the ulcers are not fun.
Oh yeah, no, I know I'll be regretting especially out here in Santa Fe with their beautiful just utilization of green chili. Like they have sushi out here, thank God, because I've been deprived of sushi for 2 months.
I mean, again, I use the same rationale that I was using in Phoenix, which is there is not a large body of water anywhere around there, so you're getting frozen fish, which is not always great.
No, but I will say this sushi place is pretty good. But one of the main things that I wanted to get, and I was happy that I saw it, was that they had a New Mexico roll, which was green chili. It had green chili in it. So it was like, of course, I gotta have this. Like, I don't know what they do to the green chili around here, but it has a really good kick to it, and it's very flavorful.
It's Hatch green chili.
I mean, yeah. I mean,
it is its own brand, for God's sake.
Yeah,
synonymous.
We get
like
it.
Kleenex and facial tissue.
Exactly. There's plenty in Phoenix, but I always feel like here it's just hotter. I don't know why. I mean, I even got green chili like in a can for my own cooking, and even then, that feels like it is hotter, spicier. Like where it actually has a
think
kick.
it's your state of mind.
That could be. That very well could be. I could just be telling myself, because the only thing I knew about New Mexican cooking was that it'll kick you in the ass when it comes out.
Yes.
So I was like, okay.
I picked up what you were putting down.
Just spelling it
I wish
out.
I hadn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please put it down, please, because it just came out and it's nasty and spicy.
Hashtag explaining the joke.
Beating a dead horse with a dead horse. That is my, MO, my modus operandi, if you will.
Thank you for making that Latin just come to life.
It's just popping. It's like 3D right in your face. Wow.
It's like a Hatch green chili rubbed around the inside of a butt plug. Yeah.
Ooh, oh, God. Oh, jeez.
You're welcome.
I mean, so that's probably also something that happens out here. I have no idea.
It's a spicy
meatball. But I don't know where I was going about that.
The green chili is very spicy out there, and you want it and everything. What is the New Mexico roll comprised of? Tell me, other than the green chili, because now it just sounds like you threw chili into rice.
I mean, if I recall correctly, it was tuna.
So it's. I'm envisioning like a California roll with green chili.
Essentially, yeah. It's not super complicated. They did like adding roe, which is I think like tiny fish eggs to a lot of roux. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I always, whenever I think of roux,
because you got a bechamel sauce.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking when you said roux.
But don't mind me.
No, you're good because you actually know how to cook.
Not really. No, we lost our actual chef component of this show. Yeah. No.
Oh, that's fair. That is very fair. Good night, sweet princess. But
you make pizzas.
I do. I make it to pizzas.
You make it to pizzas, and the particles separate.
Mm-hmm. The particles they separate and they make a gooey substance. I don't know.
Particle pizza.
Yeah.
That's the Los Alamos special, from my understanding.
Ooh, man! If there was a lot more, I feel like, based off of the places I've gone in Los Alamos, that they are sorely lacking in a kind of united cultural aestheticism that they could have gone with.
Okay.
Like, when you think of like you hear Atomic City, and that's like that aesthetic, that's not really there. And and it's kind of sad. I mean, like, yes, like the two breweries that are there, they do have beers named after Oppenheimer, you know, but it's not anything that's like, you know, 50s like Atomic, you know, like it just looks like a normal city.
So unlike the Springfield sports teams that are the Isotopes, you know, we should have something there that's similarly themed.
I do think they have a local sports team that is called something like that, but other than that, there's nothing that has that sort of like aesthetic, and it's kind of sad.
Go, my local sports team, go!
Mm-hmm. Shows how much I know.
Well, on that subject, though, how excited are you, having now been fully ensconced in the environs and the atmosphere and the, you know, general sociality of it? How excited are you to see Oppenheimer, the Nolan film?
We're definitely going to do the two movies, where we see Barbie in the morning, or Barbie, like, we're gonna try and do it. We're gonna try and do it, because that's it's not necessarily a challenge, but since they come out on the same day, I'm gonna try and take the day off, or at least get out of work early. We're gonna go see Barbie. We're gonna go drink, and then we're gonna go see Oppenheimer. We might switch it up and see Oppenheimer first, drink, and then go see Barbie. We haven't decided yet.
You know, depending upon how you like your trauma, if you want it with a chaser or not.
Exactly.
It just depends. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Though I do have to say, I do appreciate a lot of memes that have been coming about because they are on the same day. So there was one of the marketing things that occurred for Barbie was that they took, I think, like a house in either Hollywood or Miami, and they turned it into like a Barbie themed house, like pink everywhere, you know, slides and all that stuff. Like if you were buying a Barbie set, right? Mm-hmm. And so in response, a lot of people were posting that picture, and it's like, you know, Oppenheimer marketing team, you know what you got to do.
An irradiated wasteland somewhere awaits you.
Exactly.
The Nevada desert is prepared for you once more.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, that would be really cool. And so during the 4th of July.
I like that you're remarking it would be really cool if someone were to drop a hydrogen bomb just to market a movie about it.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be, an atomic bomb or a hydrogen bomb. It doesn't have to be any of those. It could just be a normal, like, it would be funny if they did some collaboration. They had the Barbie, house, and then they just detonated it. One day.
Barbie's being released, so technically a bomb is being dropped on the same day, but...
That is true. The bee bomb, if you will. But one of my favorite things that, in addition to that, there have been a lot of crossover art that people have been making. And apparently someone made a shirt that was in all pink, had the atomic, the mushroom cloud symbol, and it was labeled Barbenheimer. And I don't know if that is the exact shirt that was given to Margot Robbie, but one of those crossover shirts was handed to her, and she apparently signed it and, said something witty or something to the effect, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Like, I mean, you're already going to be in the movie theater. Just stay longer, buy another ticket, and just see them not at the same time, but see them on the same day, Everyone wins. Barbie gets a lot of ticket sales. Oppenheimer gets a lot of ticket sales, and I've heard that Oppenheimer is going to be pretty good. Christopher Nolan likens it to Inception. So,
I mean, I like that he's referencing his own films.
Of course.
There you go. It is what it is.
A qualified artistic genius such as him only needs to reference his own.
I mean... Truth be told, though, there are not a lot of other auteur filmmakers who are doing precisely what he does. It is kind of a niche genre.
Oh, yeah, I'd agree.
Generally speaking. In spite of the fact that he dipped his entire leg into the superhero genre and then pulled himself, extracted, and ran the other direction. It's an interesting concept. At least visually speaking, though, they're still very stylistically similar. He definitely has a style, and it is pronounced.
He does, and I think that's why I'm glad that he didn't continue making superhero movies, because at that point they would have been like overdone. I mean, you could even see like when they were doing more of the gritty superhero movies that occurred after The Dark Knight, and people are like, "Oh, it's another Dark Knight clone." or not necessarily those words, but something similar where people were already kind of turned off on it. Especially because, like, you look at Marvel, the MCU, and how that was not necessarily, very gritty, and so people were still engaged with that. So I'm glad that he backed out of that and started doing other movies like Inception, which his artistic style is very unique. You're right. I'm just glad that he was able to branch out and not just stick with one thing.
Well, I think we are in a perfect point here to dovetail in a number of directions I was thinking of, given that Nolan has tackled, one, superheroes, and two, time travel, and has sort of covered both of those in context. I have an interesting sort of experience in that I yesterday caught, just before it was removed from theaters, The Flash, another film that combines those two concepts and plays them out. And I have to say, I really enjoyed the film.
Okay.
But at the same time, I completely understand the criticism that it is presently just being bashed over the head with, because the art style, I feel like they made a very specific choice with the CGI.
Okay.
And particularly in time travel sequences, if and when you ever see this film, there is a point where he is kind of on what in the comics they refer to as like the sort of cosmic treadmill, which he has to use an actual device in order to propel himself back through time. And here's where me speaking to someone who works in physics is going to be very entertaining. But, in the course of this film, he manages to just do it. So he finds some sort of mental pathway into the Speed Force just through happenstance, and they don't explain the Speed Force. They present absolutely no background. It's just he finds this temporal vortex by going real fast.
Because that's the whole context for this Flashpoint is he finally discovered a way to save his mom. Right, because that's the comic, right? That's what this movie is based off of.
So essentially, in the course of the comics dating back into the 80s, the cosmic treadmill has been present in that it allows one to sort of go back in time. And the mechanism is intended to help you access the Speed Force because you have to be moving at a very specific rate. And eventually you're going to kind of... No, strangely, but there are a lot of Back to the Future references in the Flash movie, including one of the ways they tell they're in an alternate reality is that it is Eric Stoltz who is Marty McFly as originally cast, as opposed to our good friend Michael J. Fox. And so this is how he starts getting a feel that things are not quite right. But, so there is the mechanism, because otherwise you just kind of burn out eventually, or you're going to have some impact on the environs around you if you're moving at the rate of speed that you're supposed to.
Yeah.
At least this is the way they justify some of the stuff in the comics. But so he just, happens upon this and then decides that he's just going to go back and fix, his situation with his mom, which in the comics, the way they do it is that he's had access to this for a long time. It's just that the trauma eventually gets to a point where it overwhelms him and he's finally like, I've sacrificed so much and the entirety of my life is sort of based upon this notion that I'm missing a very vital part of what is, available to many others. And then they had a home where they were raised by two loving parents, and then they managed to just thrive in that environment. I was deprived of both of my parents in a single night, and they use that in the course of telling the movie, which is great. Okay. So eventually he just decides, all right, I just want to see what life would be like if if my mother lived and if my father was not imprisoned for this act. And so I want to have memories. I want to just kind of seed those thoughts in my brain and see what happens. Unfortunately, once he goes back, something gets sabotaged and he is not able to move forward into the future, and then discovers that he does not have his powers either. And so this is a component that kind of plays out in both films. I don't think I'm telling anything that's in spoiler territory, because this is kind of a general conceit, and they've also done this on the CW show. So we've played this out several times.
It's one of his more well-known story arcs. I knew about it, and I barely know anything about the Flash, other than he goes fast.
Correct. And he can vibrate.
I didn't even know that. Ooh,
he passes through solid matter because he vibrates himself at such a rate of speed that the molecules in his body separate, and he's able to just move through solid objects.
Really? Okay,
Uh-huh.
that's a cool use of, I guess I mean technically Speed Force, because that's what makes them go fast. The sonic speed. I'm gonna try and throw in Sonic jokes. I'm just letting you know. Okay, cool.
We both have our own touch points. You know, our touchstones are different, but same. So the whole point of this is that as he goes back into the Speed Force, they create in the film how they visually represent this, as opposed to a guy running on a treadmill, which is just weird in the comics. But he's running in an orb. And the orb essentially looks like he is in the midst of a coliseum of events. And so if you are dubbing a video and you're moving forward and backward in time, it has all of the events in sequence sort of pooling out into the grander audience. So you see things second by second as though you're doing frame skips on a movie as you've got it paused.
Okay.
Where you can see what's happening backwards and forwards. And so then you can rewind time to the sufficient point where you want to step in, and then you can just insinuate yourself into that moment and go forward. The art style is, when people say that it looks like PlayStation 2 graphics, they're not kidding.
Oh, no.
That is, it's the closest baseline you have. And I was sitting there thinking, well, maybe this is just the artistic style that they wanted to go with, because it's a comic and that has a comic sort of aesthetic to it, and maybe that runs. But I say all this after that the opening sequence is this very slapstick, difficult to reconcile. He's helping Batman stop a robbery in Gotham City in the middle of the day, which he jokes is like, should our Bat friend even be awake right now? Like, I mean, he's a Batman. And he has to...
So dumb. Was there a laugh track that went on after he said that?
No, but man, some of these jokes, the tone of this film was so schizophrenic, and it's kind of the Justice League thing, particularly the Joss Whedon Justice League was very, like, it just had trouble reconciling what it was. So he's supposed to be saving babies from a hospital that has essentially structurally collapsed. And the window shatters and the entire infant ward has just spilled out. So there's just infants flying through the air, and he has to catch all the babies. Now, this is where I completely lost, whereas like they went a long ways out of the way to make me like this movie, because the CGI on the babies is just atrocious. And if you look at some screen caps of this film, it hurt my feelings how bad this was. Because there were obviously live action baby, and then one that was like, we don't want to imperil an actual infant, so let's do this one full CGI. And it looks like you microwaved Play-Doh and tried to move it into a shape. And I kid you not, man, this is how on the nose weird the jokes are. If he touches things at the rate of speed he's moving, it'll essentially liquefy them, right? So he has to interact with them in a way that, like, he grabs a onesie that one of the infants is wearing and kind of gestures it. He puts a baby in a fucking microwave because he can then touch the microwave and move it because it's heat resistant and the friction's not going to kill the child. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, they're watching our podcast where we're talking about babies in microwaves and barbecue baby and all of these things. It's like, this is so horrendous. I don't know. I'm sick of my own jokes here. Man. Granted, technically that's Doc's joke, but so yeah, it was really rough. There's actually a therapy dog that is also falling. And if you've seen Suicide Squad, they basically used the same sort of rendering system that they did for the giant, like, squirrel character.
The
cross-eyed, sort of weird, anthropomorphic little animal.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they've got this dog with its tongue just flapping in the breeze and his little safety harness on, falling with all the babies, and he has to save all these things. And that's the opening sequence of the film.
Good
and I'm
Lord.
like, if this is the tone we have to establish, it's really difficult for me to reconcile. So when the stakes actually start getting high and you start seeing things that are, in fact, reality rending, it's like you have this spastic character who's just a slapstick impression of itself. And I'm still in my head going like, yeah, the character's kind of funny. And often in most comics, the character has moments where he's kind of funny, but I just don't know of anyone outside of, like, Plastic Man or Elastic Man, who's just so outlandishly bizarre that you see the character, you go, oh, okay. I can only have this in measured doses. And they've done that to the Flash, which I'm like, all right, I get that you've chosen that you want to differentiate and not everybody can do just the cool superhero archetype, right?
Yeah.
We can't just throw 8 people that all look exactly the same in a row and go like, okay, we'll differentiate them purely by the color they're wearing. But I really liked the movie, really enjoyed the concept. I thought they played with a lot of fun tropes. And if you, spoilers to all of those out there, but we already talked about it on episode 200, the Nicolas Cage cameo thing is real.
Okay.
But also that CG is pretty harmful. They did not use an actual Nicolas Cage.
Oh.
They CG'd him the whole thing. I'm interested to see what Kevin Smith thinks of it from the way that it plays out, because they do have him fighting a giant spider in the cameo. That is the scene that it's amidst, where I was like, okay, this is such a weird in-joke for those who, like, there's a very specific niche of people who know that story, who would get this. So, it really fun, a lot of fun nods. Keaton is brilliant. I really appreciated his inclusion in the film and how it plays out. And where I was leading with all of this preamble, I know I basically gave a quick review of the film. He winds up playing the scientific mind of the film and explains what the sort of like time travel, presumptions are, particularly those presented cinematically, that are being broken over the course of the film. Now, granted, I'm sure a lot of this is also very ridiculous, but they have a really brilliant metaphor that they use, which I want to get your impression of, where they're showing, okay, if you're looking at going back in time and trying to change the past, a lot of people think that they're just changing it, and so he uses spaghetti. He's taking spaghetti noodles, and he lays 2 pieces of spaghetti next to one another, and he says people think that they're doing, they're just creating like a branch, right, of this reality. So you take one of the spaghetti strands and you bend it out a little bit away from the other one. He said, so it's just kind of like it's in the same path of the other one. He says, what's really happening, he takes the spaghetti strand and just turns it completely off. And it's like, mostly it's just intersections, but these are all different strands of time going in different directions, and occasionally they'll overlap. Occasionally they don't, and he takes a pot of boiled noodles, dumps those all out into a bowl, and says, but this is really mostly what you wind up with, is that sometimes some are running parallel to one another, often it's chaos. He adds sauce to it later on and completes the metaphor. It's like, it was a very interesting thing, and I'm sitting here going like, if I really understood science, I'm sure this would be riveting to me, but I have no idea what the hell they're talking about. And it's funny just thinking of string theory and utilizing that as
that's
boiled
probably,
noodles.
I bet you any amount of money someone's like, let's do this but with string theory, and someone's like, man, spaghetti is strings, and then they both high-fived each other.
Yeah, the closest I ever came to like exploring these topics and drilling down on it, I think I've told you, is during my astronomy class, where they were showing us things like, okay, this is what the saddle universe theory is, and how we're running it with parallel time, alternate time, and these things intersecting. And we talked about it for maybe 15 minutes, and then I was like, well, that's interesting, and went on about my life.
Exactly.
So I've never really delved any greedily or any, more substantively. So hearing that, how would you, the physicist, at least reckon time travel, one, whether it's even just physically possible? Do you believe that that's something? Because as we've learned, Bob Lazar claims if you can control gravity, you can control time. This is what he's posited. And you working at Los Alamos, I'm sure you can't disclose any of those secrets that were discovered there.
My God.
But indeed. And so I'm like, one, is that even possible? And then two, what do you feel like cinematically speaking? Because I know you've seen Back to the Future.
Yes.
Is there any sort of time travel film that gets, or maybe Endgame, which I know you haven't seen?
No, but someone described to me how the time travel works, and how it was described. They established the rules of time travel fairly early on, and then they proceed to break every single one of the rules that they establish.
Exactly, which is something that happens in Flash, is that he interacts with his younger self, and he's touching them, and they're having full on like engagements with one another, not in a carnal sense, but yeah, okay. they're touching one another. They have one tooth flies out and goes into the other one's mouth. But yeah, there's weird stuff happening in this film, man. I'm telling you, it's hard to hold on. But so for you, do you have to kind of suspend your rational thought when you go into those things, or can you just watch it and be entertained?
I can. And I think I might have talked about this on air before, but
probably
my main thing is you can do time travel all you want, just like you can do any sort of sci-fi thing that you want, right? But the idea is you don't want to explain it. Mm-hmm. Because when you explain it, other than just like, I have this technology or I have this element that lets me do it, if you try and explain it any more detailed than that, you are going to first, you make it super, like, if you try and explain things in regards to any sort of technology that's futuristic, you run into issues. Most people, you either have the people that like, I like time travel. That's it. Maybe show me some consequences of time travel. That's cool. Show me the grandfather paradox. Have Fry, screw his grandmother. Whatever. Right? That's funny, right? Because it's something everyone knows with the grandfather paradox. You go back in time, kill your grandfather. What happens? I don't know. But that's still an interesting thing, right? But if you start explaining the physics behind it, you're either going to get the people that are like that it's just too confusing to them because they just wanted Fry to sleep with his grandmother. And then you have the other side of the people that actually are lay persons, someone that actually has taken a more concentrated interest in time travel and has done maybe some book reading into it or something like that. And so you by trying to explain the time travel mechanics, you fundamentally confuse both ends of the spectrum. So you either have the people that are like, I time travel good, Fry fuck grandma. Sorry, that's the only analogy that I can think of off the top of my head.
That's what we're holding on to. Yes,
they go back in time and shenanigans happens, and he's his own grandfather, and that's the funny joke, and it comes back and is referenced a lot in Futurama. Right.
Yes.
But they don't try and explain how it makes sense. As far as I'm aware, they just say it happens. And this is interesting also coming from Futurama's writing team, because several of them are mathematicians, as in they are they have doctorates in mathematics. There's actually a funny episode that I like to reference to where they switch bodies, where a bunch of the characters switch bodies, and they actually do a mathematical theorem during the show to show how they could all switch back and not leave anyone out. And that was actually something that they published a paper on, if I recall correctly. That also could be pop culture, and I could be misunderstanding it, but as far as I'm aware, I could be disinformed. Roll credits, right? Yeah. So they don't really go into detail. Or if you do something where you sit down, it's like, or another good example of time travel mechanics that I enjoy is Doctor Who. In particular, if I recall correctly, it is the first Weeping Angel episode that they have, where he just says, timey-wimey,
wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey.
And that's it. There's nothing else. He isn't like, let me write up some theorems, let me explain what goes on.
I'm sorry, not to interject.
No, you're good. They do probably explain other things, but most of those are in regards to an episode that is specific to that sort of thing that occurs, right?
Right. Yeah. They do talk about certain instances where there are like fixed points in history where this is going to happen, it's inexorable, and if you attempt to interact with it, we don't know what's going to happen. It'll rend the fabric of reality apart. At least there's concessions to these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Where, as everyone likes to invoke the butterfly principle. But at the very least, there's basic sort of scientific tenets that people hinge on. But so, sorry, so that you can jump back in there for what your thought process
perfect.
is, at least. But don't over-explain it, don't use jargon, because at one point you're either going to be wrong, or two, you're just going to confuse the issue for everybody.
And I think you actually drove home a good point that I wasn't really sure how to convey. If you explain effects, what happens if, that is probably more important, because then people can actually see that, like with Fry and his grandmother, or, you know, with pretty much a lot of the fixed point idea in Doctor Who, right? If you go back in time and do something, this will happen, as opposed to this is how you travel back in time. If you explain the cause behind it, you're either going to be confusing people or upsetting people, or, you know, stuff like that. Whereas if you just say, well, if you go back in time, this can happen, or this might happen, or the whole universe will unravel. But that's still an effect that you can see, right? It's an easier thing to say if X and Y, as opposed to, well, let me explain how X came to be.
Well, and I have a prime example to kind of illustrate what we're talking about here in ways that hopefully it's entertaining to you and I, because we have these conversations. Hopefully the listeners will stay with us here. But for me, one of the things of illustrating is that you will go on principles that are established at the time, and occasionally those things change. So Event Horizon is one of my favorite films, and I have watched it enough that when they're explaining the wormhole that they open with the Event Horizon, which is the conceit of the ship, that it is able to achieve faster than light flight by opening a wormhole within the ship that it subsequently passes through, which good luck with that. But how they claim to execute this, and as explained by the Doctor at the beginning of the film, is he says, we focus a narrow beam of gravitons in order to allow us to harness this energy. And we're going like, okay, well, gravitons was a theoretical sort of concept back in the day to say this is how we measure gravity. We assumed that it is this force, and it has subsequently been disproven. That is not it. This does not exist. It's just a theoretical particle that we were throwing out. So that we now look back on that film and laugh at the quaint scientific notion of, one, that you could ever harness a wormhole, and two, they're utilizing it with sort of defunct terms that we've all proven scientifically don't actually exist. Gravity is a wave, as we've learned from Bob Lazar. Thank you.
The best
it all comes back
scientific person of our time. The
most prestigious scientific mind that I have been exposed to, Jeremy Corbell. And so that's my example of thinking of when you start over-explaining things. If you try to use a mechanism, it's probably going to thwart you at some point or fall back on you. But to your point of one of my favorite illustrations of time travel, and done expertly, is 11/22/63. And King's execution there, because it is not taking the time to elaborately explain how this happens. It's a rabbit hole. I call it a rabbit hole. I have no idea what the hell it is. It's just, I know that if I walk into this space, I am sucked through a vortex back into this exact space at a date in the past, and it's a fixed date. It never changes. When I come back, there's a hard reset. So, you know, everything has kind of gone back when I return to it, but it can still impact the future I return to. And so you have these sort of loose notions that are put in place, or the governing rules of the story at the very least. And then you can play within those, or color within those lines as you're telling the story. And they do get to the end where they're talking about there's various realities, essentially, that every time you go back, you're creating a new reality. And that's branching off, and you're kind of, you know, causing this chaos to ensue, which is an interesting notion. And again, doesn't rely too heavily on any one scientific principle, just sort of throws out a casual, like, this is a higher source, or a higher intellectual group is essentially saying, this is what's happening. And so you don't necessarily have to lay everything out in a full-on, okay, so here is Newton's theory that we're going to posit is proving this. You're not playing with any of that. So for you, is there something specifically that you were able to kind of like suspend, other than Futurama? Is there cinematically anything that has stood out to you, possibly? Or
you did mention Back to the Future. I do like the two separate time travel mechanics that they have, because there are two separate ones that are revealed. In the first one, it's you change the future and then he disappears. But that's more of and this is where I'll just admit, as I have mentioned before, I have written a thesis, an honors thesis, if you will, for my undergraduate degree, one of them, just flaunting here. I wrote an honors thesis on the idea of time travel as used in fiction. and
Hashtag humble brag.
Exactly, and how the complexity of said time travel affects fan fiction's interpretations of it. So the more complicated the time travel, the more difficult it is for fan fiction writers to correctly interpret it.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's why I figured, jumping onto this conversation, I was in your wheelhouse. So I figured we'd be able to run with it.
I actually looked at the time. I'm like, okay, I can do a little bit of dipping into it, but I can't do the whole thing.
Well, I don't expect you to do the whole thing. It's just a simple question.
But yeah, I'm just going to be very brief about it. I defined in my paper 3 different types of time travel mechanics. You have the, I think I called it the static, the dynamic, and then the multiverse. So you have the static, where no matter what you do, you can't change time. So you can go back in time. You can it's the idea that you go back in time to try and kill Hitler, but no matter what you do, your gun doesn't fire. Someone catches you, that sort of thing. So it's that deterministic. That's what it was. I called the deterministic. You can't change the past. I had a good example, but I can't remember off the top of my head what that example was in my paper.
112263 does also, function within that same rationales that time doesn't want to be changed. It will actively fight you.
That's
now, you can still do it, but it does sort of intercede on its own behalf.
Yeah. And then you have the dynamic, which I did reference when I was defining that to Back to the Future, where the act of Marty going back in time and not necessarily flirting with his mom, just because doing that bit again is a little bit, over the top. But, he had to try and get his parents together or else he disappeared, in that he was changing his future, right? And then the last one I said was multiverse, which you've already kind of alluded to with the spaghetti. But it was also described in Back to the Future 3, when Doc explained that they went to a separate parallel universe that they can connect back to get back to their own. I think it was 3. It was either 3 or 2. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they did change the time travel mechanics in that they could travel between parallel universes. They don't change the past or the future. They just go to a different timeline. So those were the main ones that I described, and most time travel mechanics fit under those sort of parameters. There might be some combinations, yada yada, but those were the idea. I like explorations of each and every one of those. Like, I do like that idea that you can go back in time, and no matter what you do, you can't change it, right? And that sort of hopelessness that can be explored in media, with that idea in mind, that no matter, in this, I did refer to Harry Potter, but it was actually a poor excuse for a deterministic universe. Even though they established that, there was a whole reference that Hermione makes during part of book 3. And I can tell, and now that I think about it, because when I wrote this paper, this was long before TERF. She was before anyone really knew what she was.
We'll separate the art and the artist for the sake of the conversation.
I realize now that there is some poor writing in that regard, and come at me as you will, audience. But there's not a lot of. I didn't say on. I said at. Towards.
So I'm still aiming
forward, but there was a line that Hermione says, and this is something I still remember during my paper. She says, you can't go interact with your past self or else they will be upset, or something to that effect. And she is vague. There's no description as to they. So in my paper, I kind of alluded to that there might have been some sort of separate branch of the Ministry of Magic that's time police or something like that. And then that involves that you can change the future, but it is supposed to be kind of resistant to it. So,
or it could just be in a Lovecraftian sense that your brain will not be able to process the fact that there are 2 of you on space. So the imposter sort of portion of your brain would start the concept that you have to eliminate the other person to get Night Vale with it of I have to kill my other.
Yeah, and I think that would be a very cool concept to explore. Like time travel as a whole, I don't like. There's so many different things that you can explore with the idea of time travel, as long as you don't get into like too deep in the weeds about how it occurs. A focus on the effect, like we said. But like the dynamic one, I did give. I remember now. It was My Little Pony that I actually referenced to as being deterministic universe. I don't remember the exact thing of that, but it was an episode that involved time travel, and it turned out that everything was deterministic, if I recall correctly. But it's still an interesting thing to explore, right? Because now instead of like the danger of screwing up the universe, it's that dealing with the fact that you can't do anything about it and that everything is destined to occur, and then grappling with that fact. Or another iteration of that is that you were supposed to go back in time, and your actions is what caused the future to occur.
Okay.
Which is also a really cool kind of like plot twist of sorts, that you were the one that incited the accident that you went back in time to prevent. Something like that. Which is a cool concept that, I bet there have been plenty of books that have explored that. If you can think, audience, of any books, you can list them in any sort of comment section that you can access, depending on how you listen to us.
Well, also, I will say that all of these principles are at least in play somewhat in the Flash film.
Oh, that... Okay. So
yes, all three of them interact with one another in a certain extent, and that is to say... some things, there are fixed things that could not be amended. There's essentially an eventuality that must be reached without spoiling too much. So there's that concept. And then there's also the idea that he himself caused something to occur other than just course correcting to try to save his mother's life. He inadvertently causes a number of things to happen. And so, yes, all of these do appear at some point in the course of that story. Okay. So I think you might actually enjoy it when you watch it, because you won't be as precious about the source material.
That's fair.
It is as ludicrous as you would expect, but also you do love a good B film. Okay.
If you're gonna pass it off as that, then that does make
it's camp. It's so camp in a lot of really ridiculous ways. So yeah, I think it would hit your woo woo button for campiness.
Okay, I might have to try and see it.
And as you said, Nicolas Cage is in this film.
But is he really?
In some form.
Is he really though? He's just...
not in that way, but I mean, still. I mean, did you watch Ghost Rider, or even better, Ghost Rider 2 because Nicolas Cage was in it?
I think I did watch the second one. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well.
I don't remember much of it, though.
Second one wasn't great.
No.
First one wasn't really wonderful either.
There's
but
a reason why there
had
wasn't
a leg up. Oh, yeah. Yipes.
Was banished to the nether, the shadow realm. Why he's never come back. But,
okay.
Let's see.
I didn't need to pick your whole brain there. I just wanted you to name a movie that you've seen, and then we've explained an entire thesis' worth of premise, and still didn't quite get around to that. But other than My Little Pony and Harry Potter, but I mean, technically that counts.
I did want to explore, because there were some ideas. I tried jumping into any sort of time travel media that I had at least been previously exposed to. I did try and do Doctor Who, but
yes.
I would have constrained myself to the Weeping Angel episode, the first one.
Don't blink.
Don't blink.
Yes,
Thank
yeah.
you. Yes,
mm-hmm.
yes. Just because the how time travel was explained in regards to just the Weeping Angels was very straightforward.
Absolutely.
And so it was easy to try and parse that, and then also compare it to fan fiction, because that was one of the main aspects of my paper, was that I looked at how the time travel mechanics worked, and then I tried to see if other people could adapt those in a way that made sense compared to the original. So
yes.
A lot of Harry Potter fan fiction I found was incorrect, even based off of the one rule that you could only go back 24 hours in time. And so there was so many fan fictions that I read where people went forward in time, people went years back in time, and I'm like, there weren't many rules specified.
Mm-hmm.
You got 24 hours. That's all. And so people were like, nah, I want to do my own thing. So that, and then you have other ones like, I read really good fan fiction of Doctor Who involving the Weeping Angels. And just there was one that was almost I think it was over 100,000 words, and I spent a day or two reading it. And it could have, it should have, and I wish I remembered. And if I'm sufficiently motivated, I can even try and find it and put it as a link or something. But it should have been made into a 3-part episode. It was so good.
I do sorry. I
No,
love
no,
that
you're good.
concept of like that the angels are essentially siphoning off your potential energy by how far that they can embed you into the past, and so they're taking up all that. We'll call it chronal discharge, whatever it actually is.
Yeah.
But
Which is
yes,
yeah, which is still fine because they just say it's some discharge or something like that. They aren't like, well, I mean, they probably went a little bit too much into detail, but like at that point, you're already like, well, this is a scary episode. I'm spooked. I'm not going to listen too much on it. If I recall correctly, he was talking through a TV at that point.
He was,
because they were speaking to the main character through media that they had left behind, which was also really sort of fascinating because they couldn't directly interact with her.
But they did, because they knew what she was going to be asking. Yes,
yes. So in that case, that was fantastic writing, and I enjoyed it.
Oh, it's great.
One of the few times Moffat was actually good. That's all I'm going to say.
I will just patently disagree with that, but no, it's amongst the many times that Moffat was great. But I'm still a Russell Davies kid. I agree. But yeah, Moffat did get ahead of himself in many instances, but that was not one of them. That was a fantastic episode. Just
don't let him write an arc. That's all I'll say. Anyway, one-offs are perfect. Yeah, one-offs are great. But anyway, like just I that, and then there was also like a what was it? It was an earlier episode of Star Trek that I also tried looking into where they used a gravitational slingshot. I think it was I always call it the one with the whales. Star Trek 4,
The Voyage Home. Yes.
Which I like. Yeah.
Continue.
No. I liked how they described it, but I didn't. I eventually scrapped looking into that because I didn't want to read fan fiction of Star Trek just because I was afraid of running into was it Spock Hurt fiction where one is injured and the other one tenderly cares for the other, and it's supposed to be semi-romantic but not necessarily like sexual in a way. But this is me getting into my fan fiction knowledge that I don't want to delve into at the moment. But yeah, so I avoided that.
Twincest or wincest.
Supernatural. Yeah. Oh man,
easy. So it's funny. Out of this whole conversation, I will harken back to yet another one that is comics themed, which Superman 2, I believe. He flies around the planet to reverse the way the planet turns, and that is how he changes time and causes it to go back.
Saves Lois, right? If I recall correctly. Yeah,
that is correct. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, there's just a rewind button on the planet if you make it go the other direction. It's like, no, that's gravity again, friends. I just
he reversed the gravity's polarity and just ran. He ran really fast. It is established. You travel back in time in DC universes. You just go really fast. So very
unfortunate. It is what it is. And yet this whole time I was just trying to get you to say that you really loved Jean-Claude Van Damme's portrayal of Time Cop. That's really all I was going for.
This is where I mentioned that I have not seen that movie.
I know. It's just I was trying to give us an out, and that was all I was angling for.
I'm
not sure you've even heard of Time Cop before this day, but
I have.
Oh, have you?
Yes, I know that it was a movie, and I know Jean-Claude Van Damme with his magnificent splitting action where he can just hop on rails and just splits.
Name 5.
Name 5 Jean-Claude Van Dammes?
Or splits.
Oh.
or Time Cop movies.
Wait, there were more than...
No.
Was there was there a sequel? I didn't think
there was. There was, but I think it was a straight-to-video. Or I might be confusing it with the multiple Universal Soldier sequels, which... they star Bill Goldberg going forward, which is just not a good idea. I will say, though, there was a very spicy, like 15 to 20 second physical entanglement in Time Cop, which I was very fond of in my pubescent days, because that was a late 90s film. I was fully exploring my own wiles at the time. But so Time Cop holds a special place in my heart and in my hand. But anyway... That's where we are. Weigh in the comments, as Michael said, extolled the virtue of one. If you saw The Flash, what did you think? And I know Edward really enjoyed it. Superfan Edward out there who told me I needed to go see it. And yes, as a comic kid, I really appreciated it, liked it. But yeah, there are some things in there that I really, as I alluded to on episode 200, you just can't ever get it right, because ultimately with taste, you want to make the movie that you would want to see in your own head. So no one's ever going to get it 100%, dead on balls accurate, to crib from my cousin Vinny. But Dark Knight definitely got close. They did their level best there, so bless you, Chris. But we're all just playing in our own sandbox, I think, when you want to sort of give a concept for what you like. But weigh in. Tell us what you felt about The Flash, and also what your favorite time travel movie or book or entertainment is. Because I know that we would love to hear about it, and we talk about it pretty regularly. As I think 4 or 5 episodes ago, we had one that was the Time Travelers podcast already, where we got into our Doctor Who nuances all over the place. But
I do remember that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a good time. But anything else you want to touch on before we let the listeners off for the week?
No. Oh, well, I will say that I don't think I listed my favorite time travel because I don't think I have one, but I did list a couple that I enjoyed. But there was one that I don't think I touched upon yet, one that I feel like we definitely should, and one whose door I will be walking through to start this episode all over again.
How do you leave an idiot in suspense?
The Tower.
I'll tell you later.
Oh!
Yeah, you're not wrong. That was not the first thing that I thought of when I was running through the cycle there, particularly even with King. But no, you're not wrong. I will give you credit. Yes. Mm-hmm. But of course, that is that thing is it's a whole separate reality. So you have to start opening, and I feel like I'm trapped in the grapefruit right now. As a matter of stern fact, I only see what it shows me. Like Rhea of the Coos before me, I'm just sitting slack-jawed with a snake wrapped around my legs and cat in my lap.
Mm-hmm. And how?
Yes, indeed. Just having the snake spit in my mouth. Dirty.
Ooh, spicy.
Strangely enough, so I also, before we get out of here, I will say I am now 6 books away from having completed the entirety of the King oeuvre. So we're ratcheting it down. I just finished Fairy Tale and Roadwork, and so I'm starting to crest in there. So be on the lookout, friends. That full and complete listing and ranking of the Stephen King books is in the offing, which I've changed it probably 5 times since I have been reading other things where I was like, yeah, I like this better than that, but in retrospect, I think I like this better than this, and I like this better than that, and this one didn't hold up as well as I expected. So
what you're telling me is Talisman is now your favorite Stephen King book.
There will be a day when that is true.
Oh, no.
And that is when someone has traveled back in time and eliminated every other Stephen King book that has ever been written. And the only thing that is left standing is The Stand. I mean, the Talisman. But no. Man, I've discovered I will say, without spoiling anything, I feel like the fantasy realm and King and I do not get along, because Eyes of the Dragon and the Talisman series I just wasn't in for. Didn't dig it. I think the closest that we've gotten is, of course, the Dark Tower has a lot of fantasy elements in it, and then Fairy Tale definitely leans very heavily into it, and I really enjoyed Fairy Tale. I've heard mixed reviews from other people that said it's a little puerile and it's a little bare bones, and it's not his most revolutionary concept, but I actually really enjoyed it, and it's pretty high ranking. I've moved it around subsequently as I reflected with looking at some of the other books, but it's a good concept. I liked it more than I have liked a lot of others in the running, so I would absolutely recommend it. It's an excellent read. Fun characters, interesting, and as a person who has recently lost a canine companion, it punched me in the feels an awful lot over the course of that story. I was crying through most of it, so it did exactly what it was supposed to. It elicited an emotional response. It evoked many things in me. So
there you go.
So there we go. I think that is it. I've talked about my X-Files viewing. We've talked about the things I'm reading and the things I've seen. You still haven't seen Renfield yet, I'm sure, because I can see it in your face. So you're going to go see Barbie, but you haven't caught Renfield, which is free for nothing on Peacock.
That involves having Peacock, which I do not have.
Okay, well, and technically Peacock's not free,
Yeah.
but Melissa and I liked it so much we were actually probably going to own that film because we have raved about it. So we had a conversation the other night where it was like, it's a really good movie. We were both thinking about it, and she was describing it to somebody else, and it's just that perfect blend of camp and odd gore and just random hilarity. That doesn't take itself too seriously, but also has just a lot of very ingenious and delightful things. I don't want to spoil anything for you because I need to, but at some point there is going to be some witchcraft performed in a very inventive way, given the circumstances and things that they have to hand that we'll have to discuss later because it's one of Melissa's favorite scenes.
All right.
But
I will try and make a concerted effort this week.
Oh, well, I didn't put a deadline, but I mean, see it sometime.
I'm going to challenge myself to watch Renfield by the next time we record, and if I don't, you can come up with some sort of retribution that I have to do. And we'll put it on a YouTube After Dark or something like that.
You can't have any more green chili through the entire time that you stay in New Mexico. No more if you haven't seen Renfield.
All right, Renfield is on my computer right now, and I'm currently watching it. Because to deprive myself of green chili in this beautiful state is to just deprive myself of life.
Well, this has been as joyfully schizophrenic as any of our other episodes have been, so thank you all for being here as per usual. We love having you. Of course, there's a link in the show notes that'll take you to all of our irrelevant socials that will facilitate you liking, subscribing, rating, and reviewing. We'd love to hear from you, of course, as always. And if you enjoy, you can interact with us on whatever form or fashion or app that you're utilizing, wherever you steal your favorite podcast audio from. I'm sure you can leave us a little message. We'd love to have a chat. But as always, new episodes winging your way every lovely Monday morning with, notable exceptions. But we're not going to dogpile anything. When a man's dying, you can't, kick a mule while it's down.
Damn editor, what do we pay him for?
Hey, you still got it done on Monday, so I mean, I'm not giving you too much of a shark there, but we were worried about you for a minute.
You posted at 5 a.m. somewhere, probably.
Absolutely. It's just 5 a.m. on Tuesday, but we're not pushing that. So no, you got it on Monday. It still happened. It's so you did good. And then of course Fridays over on the Tubes of You, we do a bunch of hilarity and nonsense there. Commonly, it's always a good time, and we've just gotten back into doing some supertheticals. The last of which was absolutely delightful, and we just saw Doc Day come and go. Pun intended. And so you can all celebrate in your own inimitable ways there. I'm sure that got a chuckle on the other end of a line somewhere as he's listening, so you're welcome. But check us out there. Join us anywhere that you would like, in fact. We're not going to encumber you. Make your own decisions. It's like time travel. Set your own rules.
Fuck your own grandmother.
Man. Really hitting that one over the head by the end of this. Thank you. So I think there's no better note to leave this episode on. And so for all you gushing grannies out there, we're going to bid you a fond adieu for the Disinformed podcast this week. I'm Shane.
And I'm Michael.
Have a Baja Blast.
And zippity zoop, we're out of here.